All right, everybody. Adam back with another episode of the Bowhunter Chronicles podcast brought to you by Huntworth. Huntworth gear for all types of weather, all types of terrain, all types of budgets. It's clothing that just works. Check them out at huntworthgear.com. And I have to get into we have to do our Patreon quarterly giveaway here at some point, but it's hunting season and things are moving fast. So next week, follow along on Instagram and I'll post that when I'm going to go live and do that. Um, just got back from the UP and man, I got Eric Nelson here. We're going to talk about some like in season scouting, like finding the X, doing some e scouting, water access, because Eric's 100% able to. I mean, I'd say he's about 75% uh, look on a map, go in there from the water, and he's going to find sign. So I want to get into that. One of the things we're going to get into, though, is kind of relating to the UP trip. John didn't end up going. It was just Frank and I. He had to bail like the morning of like when I'm at work and Frank's like John's not going, and so I had to call him and all this stuff. But it was just Frank and I, and so we had this piece of property just to ourselves. And I like going there hunting with new people, and I ended up like hunting it fairly lazily. Like there's a whole big piece of property. I didn't walk it as I normally would to try and find like the hot sign or anything like that because years and years and years you go in there and you're like, this is what happens. This is where there should be sign. And honestly, this year there wasn't, and we had just like this little time frame. But it was still fun. I ended up shooting a doe, missing a doe, saw a really nice buck. Frank ended up missing a really nice buck as well. And this is coined by Barefoot Dave. Frank actually got it, the miss on the 360 cam, and he said if that doesn't sell 360 cameras, if that's not their motto, so easy, Uncle Frank can do it. They do have their downfalls, low light, some of that stuff, but man, what a cool piece of equipment to be able to do that. So definitely something to check out. It was certainly a fun trip for us, but like I said, it just wasn't as serious as I would have had it like to be. As far as like the gear is concerned, I'm using the Maverick saddle from Latitude. Um, Absolutely love that saddle. It's just so simple, super easy. Um, and then their sticks, like the sticks are amazing. So definitely go to Latitude Outdoors, check those out. And if you're not following along with their Grit series, I think it's like some of the best, like raw, well produced stuff. I'm gonna have Derek on here. I got to get a hold of him. He's super busy now too, so it's all of this stuff, but just on file management and producing that and like telling a story with these guys that isn't like overproduced. It's actually like who they are. Definitely check that out. I've been using a bunch of the Genesis 3D gear stuff, 3D printing. Just amazing guy. Austin and Hope are incredible. So Spartan Forge, all that. So definitely check out our sponsors. You can use code Bowhunter with Spartan Forge to save 25%, BHC with Latitude to save some money, as well as if you're a Patreon, Austin with Genesis 3D. And then, obviously, a big shot zinger. Like we got so many sponsors, so many partners, so many friends. Check them out as well. But got Eric in here, and we're gonna talk with him about kind of figuring it out. How do you break down things e-scouting. So but just to kind of get into it, Eric, how are you doing today? And like how's your season going so far? Like your season has kind of pushed you to kind of have to find some new spots. So like what's going on in your world as far as hunting is concerned?
Yeah, so thanks for having me first off. It's been a rough year for me. I went into season up until a month before season. I thought I had things pretty set, and then EHD hit pretty hard where I hunt. So um, after finding a bunch of dead deer down there, I just decided to find some new areas to hunt and started looking at the map. Actually had to call the DNR for the place I went because I wasn't sure if I could actually legally hunt it, which after talking to the guy, I was clear for what I wanted to do. But mainly I look at water access just because it cuts off 50%, 75% of people. And yeah, I started looking at the map and I don't know, everything just came together there. There's a bench with oaks on it.
Well,
Oh,
before we get into that,
sorry.
like the thing is you know for myself, right? And I was in, I don't know, maybe it's like disingenuous, but I always think of myself as like a regular guy who's like, when I think about a new spot or whatever, I'm helping a guy out or whatever. People are always like, I want to hunt, and like I've said before, forever, you know, me, Frank, have always been like, oh, you want to go hunting? Like, come on, let's go. And then there's people who just they don't know how to e-scout, or they don't know how to look for sign, or they don't know what to do. And like the one spot that I was hunting where I mean, at this point in the year for me, when I say the spot where I missed that doe, there's many. However, I was thinking like when I was walking in there, I we found it. We found a spot. I found it years ago. Went back in there, verified the sign. We put a camera in there, and this is preseason, and we walked the whole thing. Like it doesn't matter. You're just blowing everything out. You're not worried about deer. You're not worried about access. You're not worried about the wind. You're just trying to, you know, get an idea of how deer are moving through there. Then when I went back to hunt it, I went in. First sit was morning sit in the dark, blind.
Did you already have like a tree picked out or
No,
just like a
well,
general
I
area
had a
or
general area like,
okay.
and I think maybe like it's wrong, right, to say I'm just gonna hunt where my camera is, but you set the camera kind of at least having an idea of,
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's wrong if the deer are coming through there. I mean,
yeah. But the thing is that, like, sometimes you're like, you got this deer on camera and they're all at night, but you're going in and hunting, and so it's like
okay.
back and forth. But I just was gonna go in there. It was a reason to go in there and quick hunt, sit. And I mean, it's literally from where I parked, it was 100 yards, but I did about a half a mile, 3/4 mile loop to go around to drop down the way that, and
To go around what? Like,
bedding, like,
okay.
so like there's a bedding point, and then a real thick, like, it's not a clear cut, but it's just like, you hunted enough, like, of the jack pine swamps, like where you got that like thick
Hmm.
area in there that's like trying to regrow whatever. It's
Right.
not pine, but it's just like maple or popple or whatever. So it's that in this bottom, and there's a bedding point that comes down. And so you want to get it so that they're bedded with the wind on their back looking that.
Right.
So you could literally drop right down on there, but I was hunting in the morning, so I'm trying to get them to come back to bed. So I walked all the way around and then dropped down. And because they're moving across that edge, there's like two or three trails that were coming together. But you know, for someone who's new or someone who doesn't know how to e-scout, or like, I was thinking like walking in there, like, you know, this is, so it's not like really outside of my comfort zone. But normally what I would do is I would go in there and I would hunt it in the evening first, get an idea, and then plan on like how I was going to hunt it in the morning. But it was just the way that it played out when the deer were in there, all of that sort of stuff. I was like, okay, I have to hunt in there in the morning. And now, um, walking in there, you know, an hour, 2 hours before daylight, just wandering around, fumbling through this thing. It's,
Yeah, that's
you know,
intimidating.
yeah, yeah. And like, so for someone who's, I don't want to say like not good at it, but like not comfortable in the light, it's probably like there's no way in hell, right?
Right.
So then I just go like one further and I say, okay, well, you seem to just be like, you look at a map and you're like, it's going to be right here. Then you go in there and you're like, yep, seen a buck. It was, or like, you won't believe the sign that I found.
Right.
And so for you, especially this year coming off of, you had everything figured out and now you're trying to figure out other spots and to go in and do that. So what is your like hunting style overall? You had said like I look for water access because it pushes people out, but it, that even seems like I've said it on with the water feather guy, like the last time we had you on here, like just you and I doing a podcast, like that's to me like intimidating to just be like, all right, well, I'm gonna hop in this boat and just float down the river to a spot that I've never been or whatever. So like how does that process work for you? And like you had told me where you were hunting and I was talking to Frank about it and he's like, "Well, why didn't he try this river? Or why didn't he try this river? Or why didn't he try this river? Like what brought him to that specific spot?" So like what goes into your thought process from like the jump from like the first thing that you're looking at?
I mean,
Well, it doesn't make any sense. Like so for me, I can say I look for a big tract of land
right.
that doesn't doesn't have any roads or that has like somewhat like limited use, right?
Right.
So you can't just like drive up and jump 100 yards off the road. And
I mean, that's just like using your boat. It's limited use, right? Same type of thing. Um, I mean, I don't, what brought me to that area is just because I've camped up there before and I know there's a higher deer population up in that area. And that's what, I was thinking when I started looking into that area. Because when I'm up there all summer, there's deer running around all over. So that's what originally got me looking in that area. Now, like 10 years ago, I did go up there and do some scouting, but I wasn't sure um if it was even legal to hunt. So I was hoping to run into an officer when I was up there then, and I didn't, and then I never pursued it any farther than that. But I also didn't really know what I was doing then. I just basically went up there walking around, right? Like now I know more what to look for. And like when I start e-scouting, I'm looking at mainly water access. Probably 75% of the hunting I do is water access. And then I'm looking for, just like everybody else says, like transition lines or like if you pull up on a map, if everything looks the same, I usually don't even look into it. I'm looking for like if you pull up a map online, like different colors, and then you can follow them different colors or their transition lines around and see where they all come together. And that's usually where I'll start. And then if you put some topo in with that and get some ridges and benches and stuff, I mean, that's what I look for.
and so what one of the things that when I was thinking about doing this podcast with you, I was thinking like, you're a very like soft spoken, like humble guy. So you're like, whatever, I just fumble around and find it. But everybody has access to the same information. Like,
Correct.
because you just like, oh, I just look at the buck bedding stuff and the bedding stuff and all that, it's just the day and infall stuff. Well, everybody has that access. Everybody knows or can tell you like, oh, this is where bucks should bed, or no, this is how they should move. But I feel like there's very few people who can look at it on a on their phone and then walk right in there to, within um, a couple hundred yards of the spot, right? So like a little bit further, like when you pull that boat up there, like what are your first steps like when you're walking on that land. And it's funny because one of the things why I said that about the UP is that like, the other night you had to sit where you were like, this is the dumbest thing ever because I sat where there was no sign just because I was,
Just off history,
yeah,
I sat there.
yeah. And that's what I felt like in the UP. Like my dad wanted me to go set this camera. He's like, I needed you to set another camera, and it's a spot where the buck that's right over your shoulder there. Um, I I killed that one, the little one, but I had missed a bigger buck earlier in the morning, and but it was raining the first day we were up there, and I walked all right the way around, and I walked a transition line, and I there was no scrapes or anything, but there was just a couple little rubs on the backside of this bedding, and I'm like, on a south wind, like you can kill a buck right here, you can kill a deer right here, and
And why did you think that? Just because there was a couple little rubs?
just it was really because like historically, I know that this area holds bucks, and there's a couple of ridges that come down like this. Where those ridges come down are on either side of this thicket. So they did a whole bunch of logging back in there, and it's really odd logging, and it looks like all these fingers, like they made these like stripes through it because the logger, quote unquote, I don't know who they used or why, but he was a deer hunter, and he said, I know what you guys want. So it's like all these like rifle shooting lanes kind of.
Mm.
But fast forward 5-10 years, you can't see down there, and it's all thick, but it's different. There's like all types of different habitat. But there was a couple of like big, maybe, you know 2-3 acre areas, maybe a little bit bigger than that. um One of them's probably 2 or 3 acres, and one of them maybe 3-4 acres, that it was like too wet for the machines to get through. So they
Hmm.
just left that. So it's like
Mm.
all super, super thick with like new regrowth on the edges. Well, on the one side, I mean, you're just kind of talking like how it plays out for the wind or how it plays out for daytime or nighttime like activity. If they're coming back to bed this way, and then you don't see them leave bed that way, then they're exiting on the other side. And so that's kind of what's happening right there, is they're like making this big loop every night. At least that's the way that I understand it. But walking down there, it was all the like super fresh sign, right? And so it was, in the last couple days, these rubs had happened. So these deer are like moving along that edge. Well, not far from there, 100, 200 yards, my dad said, we'll go back in there and put that camera somewhere, wherever. Well, there's a giant runway coming off of this ridge, which if you were going to want to like set a camera, that's probably where I should have put it. But then up there was a there was a runway coming down off of the ridge, and then there was a runway, like a more faint runway going right along the edge of the thick stuff. So this runway dropped down off of the ridge and went into the thick stuff. And then there was a faint runway walking going up into the thick stuff. And like I was like, oh well, I'm gonna walk in here. And as soon as I took one step up in there, there was a giant fresh rub. And then I walked back in there.
Off that faint trip.
Yep. And then it was, I mean, there was probably 50 old rubs. And I'm talking this year. And this is the last day or second to last day, where if I would have not been lazy and I would have said, okay, I'm just gonna go look for sign. Because where there was normal sign, like where we normally see scrapes and things like that, there was nothing. There was not a
That's what
single
I'm finding this
single
year
rub.
too.
There was not a single anything. And so in my mind, I think your situation is a little bit different, but in my mind, I was thinking it's just not happening yet. Like it's been weird temperatures, like the deer aren't like laying down the sign, but they're still here. And so that's why I was just like, okay, we'll just go back to the tried and true areas and we'll kind of see what's going on. And man, I walked in there and it was like everything that you would look for. It was like thick edge, regrowth of all these like little popples and stuff that were snapped off, rubbed up this year, last year, whatever. And then it went into like this thick, thick, thick stuff. And so I set his camera on that faint trail and haven't heard whether there's any pictures or anything coming out. And I'm sure, I guarantee if I'd have put the camera over there on the one that came off the ridge, there'd be a lot of deer on it,
but
but
probably not the
probably
deer
not.
you're looking for.
Yeah. Yeah. And I saw a really nice buck there. And I sent Frank down in there to hunt it, and we got a little bit more information. The neighbor's property had like apple trees that were just holding apples like crazy. Frank went in there at like 2:30, drove around instead of driving through. Like so, normally we drive through the property and then hunt that backside, and it was just us. So I was like, "Well, what do you think about accessing it like you would access it if you were actually like if this was public land, or if this was if it wasn't an easy like hop on the four-wheeler, drive across the property. If you were hunting it from public land, everything the same, like where would you access it from? Would you park at this parking area or would you park at that parking area? And nobody ever does that. Well, so he drove around, and there he said at 2:30 there was 30 deer in the neighbor's yard with all these apples, and there's bucks chasing does, and it was just wild.
Well,
And then he got out of his truck, was going to the back of his truck to get his bow out, and two does walked basically right up to him while he was trying. And he's like, "I'm trying to get my bow out." So he's like, "Finally, I had to get my bow out." So gets his bow out, and where I had seen the buck, it came worked its way up this ridge. He sat up on the ridge, and he said he watched like three or four deer walk right 10 yards, 10 feet in front of his truck. So they're just coming in. They were over there working their way down this edge, and maybe that's why there isn't the sign like where we normally would see it, because they're in the food up here instead
right,
of like where they were. But regardless, I was not like like if had I like took the first day and said I'm not going to hunt, I'm just going to walk the entire property, which is like what you would do out of state. And I mean,
right.
I was even there like saying like I was kicking
Yeah,
myself
you've
being like,
been saying that.
and it was so hard because it was like just Frank and I, and like normally you can get a whole bunch of eyes on it without, and when new people come to the property they've never hunted there, they want to go see for themselves.
Right,
And that kind of, and when there's a lot of people up there, then that it synthesizes it down. So like the two or three good spots, or the five spots that are there, well, people are there. So it's then you have to go find yourself, get on the hot stuff. But when you
right.
have, the keys to the whole place, it's like, well, I'll just go here, see
Yeah.
what's going on, and waste a lot of time. And so, like for you, going back to like your season this year, like going in the other day, just sitting, and it's funny because like earlier in the year you had a hunt, and I say that with air quotes, where you went in and you just walked around, didn't see what you wanted, and didn't do anything. So like
Yeah.
what changed there?
So I been trying not to hunt this year if I don't see the sign I want to see. Like I feel like it's a waste of time. And yeah, so a little backstory on the spot I hunted the other night. I've had a cell cam in there for 3 years, and I shot a nice buck there. I've missed a nice buck there. Last year I had an encounter 2 times with a really nice buck there, and it's all been from now until like the 5th of November. It just is a super hot area. So I haven't been in there at all this year. Summer, well, in the spring I went there and I pulled my cell cam that I had out there, and did some scouting then. Spring, it was April, I think. But so I just went in there off history for the last 3 years, and on my way in, I was like, man, there's just not seeing any sign, like not like the deer trails. I mean, you can still see where they're at. There's just no tracks in them. There's no leaves kicked up. Now, a lot of leaves have fallen in the last few days, so some of that could be covered up, but I didn't see one rub. I didn't find one scrape. Um, and I just went in and climbed the tree, and I got up in the tree, and the whole time I was like, man, this is silly. Like I didn't see anything. Like if I would have went into an area I didn't know, and seen nothing, I wouldn't have stayed there. I would have went and scouted somewhere else or did something else. So the whole night I was just, thinking I'm just wasting my time. I'm wasting my time. And I didn't end up seeing anything. So I should have just got down and scouted around. But, knowing what I know from past years, I figure if there is any, bucks in the area still, they're probably going to be doing the same thing.
So again, like back to like what I was saying, before I kind of went into the UP stuff is like when you go into a spot, like where, how close are you hunting to the boat? Or I mean, are you trying to get like right on the X and just pop off? Are you wandering around? Like what is like the decision making process like from the again from the e-scouting to like boots on the ground, and then in those water access scenarios, like what is like the most effective or um I guess fruitful sign, like what the productive sign, that's the word I was looking for, that you've found. So like when you're looking at it on your phone, what is it that says, okay, I need to go here for the boat, and then how far are you going, and then what makes you stop and say, I gotta hunt here?
So I hunt anywhere from basically hanging right over the boat to, I mean, I'll go in as far as I need to go, whether it's 100 yards or 400 yards or whatever it is. But typically what I try to do, especially in a river bottom is I look for fingers of trees between marshes that makes a good pinch. And then usually um where that opens up into the bigger woods that's more open, there's usually a scrape right there. And then usually those fingers between the marshes will have rubs in them. Um, so that's usually what I look for. And I try to, in those areas, I try to locate when I'm e-scouting what I think is bedding. And usually that's you know, like an island in the marsh or like um some real thick like red brush they bed around that's in the marsh, stuff like that.
So one thing, I don't know, like I'm trying to relate it to like whitetail hunting and like what you said, but if you go back and listen to like when we were talking about our elk hunt, right? Like when we were in an area with a ton of elk, and it was really interesting to see the like generalities, and then the like what the elk are actually doing. So you say, okay, it's got to be north facing, it's got to be this much, blah 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 blah. But these elk were everywhere, right? They could be everywhere. And why I relate that to this is because when you say like when you look at it and you say, okay, this is what I think is bedding, like I know I've hunted with you, I know what spots you're talking about, and I know what like the generalities. I know, I mean, we went and did the Dan Info, scouting seminar. So I've seen what he looks at as bedding. I've seen what you look at bedding. And then I also know that like, you and I hunted and we walked all over this entire marsh, and we found like two little tiny rubs. And we're like, okay, we're going to sit here. The wind's going to play like this. This is what's going to happen. And then a little 4 point gets up that was like, must have been laying on the bank of the river, like right behind us, and walked right upwind, like through us. And that was not, I mean, I don't think that's what you would consider betting.
No,
And I know like there
that
were,
it did make sense though, because that buck would have been on that oxbow.
yeah,
So it did make perfect sense. But
but like, and I know that there's been times like where you've been sitting and you're, downwind of betting over here, but then there's, I think of one like little spike or 3 point or something that was like bedded in the cattails, like right out
hmm
halfway between where it should have been, where quote unquote like bedding would have been.
Right.
And then and so it's like
That's the
that's the hardest
difference.
part of the
Yeah.
whole thing.
That's the difference between e-scouting and going in there, right? Like you can predict by looking in e-scouting as much as you want, but until you actually get in there and look around, you don't really know what's in there or where exactly they're bedding.
So back to that, like what are the like main factors that like set up like stack if you were to stack a whole bunch of things for success? Because when you say okay, fingers in the marsh, when you say scrapes, when you say rubs and things like that, and if I mean I think about like a place in particular by the Patreon hunt where it's like that drew everybody, the first year, like everybody's got to go look there, but there's like it seems like it's very nuanced, like in some ways, because there's multiple fingers, but all the fingers don't lay out the same, but there's the same kind of stuff on each one of them. You'll find rubs going along the pinches, you'll find scrapes here, scrapes there, but there's not like there's only a couple of spots that are like the spot, right? And so what when you get in there, when you said there's a difference between like e-scouting and boots on the ground, like what are the commonalities to these spots that kind of make it better? Come on, we want to.
You
You're
could,
supposed to say it's situational.
it's situational, you know. Uh Man, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what to say. It's just you get in there and I mean, I feel like once you're in there, it sounds dumb, but you're looking for that hot sign like everybody is. And that's, you know, fresh scrapes that have just been hit, fresh rubs. I mean, you can tell if a rub was made in September or 3 days ago, if it's still tacky or, the color of it. So, I mean, I'm looking for the fresh sign, like fresh stuff.
I guess maybe like a better way to put it, okay, because that's one of the things where everybody's like, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, you got it. Like, okay, you're podcast pro now. You're like, I'm just looking for the hot sign. It's situational. It's just all of these things. But uh, realistically, I think the bigger question is like, what makes you stop? Because you can find that stuff, and I mean, I can. At the time where my brother-in-law Chris and I went in there, and the time it ended up where he got lost, and then he ended up throwing up and fell over, all the fun stories with Chris. Um, but we were walking in and there was a scrape that was like one of those like walking scrapes
hmm
that you that was literally like dirt still on the leaves. It was like
Yep.
this deer's like right in front of us.
That's when you stop.
But yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Like, what is it when you're finding like the fresh rubs? Because go back to where I was setting that camera. Like, I'm following these rubs where I'm looking, all the shavings are on the bottom, but I know that they're heading into the thick stuff. Like, literally, this past weekend, I didn't find any scrapes. Like, not a single scrape. So it wasn't like, oh, this one's been hit, this hasn't been hit. Like, there was none. Field edge scrapes, there was nothing. Um, so and then you find those walking scrapes, you find those scrape lines, and then you find like, oh yeah, we're looking for the car hood scrape, but like in a situation where your water access, a lot of this stuff may be really narrow, there may be terrain features and all this stuff, how it all comes together. Like what makes you stop and say, this is where I need to be? Situational, right?
Situational. The inner me saying stop. I guess if I've done it enough times to have not stopped and blown deer out, and then you back up and you're like, man, I should have stopped there. So then the next time you're in that same uh circumstance, I guess, you kind of know when to stop. You get that gut feeling to stop. That's just something that I feel like I've learned from doing it.
And so there's other factors that are I find myself um like looking, and maybe it's because of maybe now it's more because like of using having the longbow. That's one of the things like going up there. I had the compound and the longbow, and I ended up killing that doe with the compound. But I look at the trees different. I look at everything, and in those river bottoms, the trees, they're either really big or really shitty. It seems like.
Yeah, it's usually the shitty ones I'm in.
So
The worst trees are usually the best ones.
yeah. So how are you judging like that, like where to set up for cover, for shooting, like for the wind, for all that stuff?
I always try to set up to where I can shoot an edge or transition line, and I always try to set up, you know, in a tree with cover. I don't want to be just a big bump hanging off the side of the tree. So usually it's a split or multiple trees that come up in one spot. And even if I'm 5 or 10 yards from where I actually want to be, if that's the tree, that's the tree.
So one thing I'll ask you in all your setups and all your, because I mean, I don't like try to quantify it. Like Eric, I would say probably over the last 5 years, you've had how many encounters with like mature bucks? Like not that you've killed, but just like in
At least one a year.
I think yeah, there's more than that
Usually,
now.
usually 2 or 3 encounters a year.
Because it's like you're all it's in a it seems to just be like you said on a whim, not on a whim, but you're like the wind is right, I'm going in there, I'm going to this spot, and then you're right, like that's the way that it has happened. And the reason that I'm asking this is because I see a lot of these guys who set up and they're always in like the super thickest stuff. They're like right in the thick. And I feel like I hunt more like you do, where I'm like on the transition line on the edge of the thick and I'm in the open, I
Right,
think, and these deer are moving through the thicker stuff.
right.
Like, so yeah, in your setups, how close are you getting to the the thick stuff? Or like, because there's people who will say that, the deer, they want to make sure, like these mature deer or whatever bucks, they generally want to have something touching them. They want to be in an area where they feel secure. So like, what has been your experience as how these deer are moving through there?
I'm usually right on the edge if I can be of the thick stuff because from what I've seen, they're usually in the thick stuff or right next to it so they can duck into it if they need to. So I'm right on that line typically.
And then when you're talking about like situational sign, been burned before, all of these sort of things, like do you so do you, are you of the mindset like Dan Infalt, John Eberhart, like every sit you're gonna kill, or are you observation or stage hunt any of these
I
areas?
usually I usually early season I kind of stage hunt my way in and then closer to rut I just usually dive right in there. And usually that's when I'm confident that I'm gonna kill something.
So breaking it down for like the time frame, because you're right. Like you're usually from like right now, I want to say Halloween is like your day. Like
Pretty, yeah, right around
that
there usually.
that's the day. Um, do you think that for you this stuff kind of plays out a little bit better? I don't want to say like easier, but it just kind of like makes a little bit more sense for you. Um, to be like on the X, because in these marshes or in these areas, there's only so many places for them to go. Like it's kind of like all the things stack up to like narrow them down to like one area.
Yeah, I do. I really do. I mean, yeah, that's usually the way it goes down.
And so that's all just these, I guess when you're in that this time of year, because I feel like there's this big misunderstanding, and I would even say for myself, of the the pre-rut and rut activity, right? So all the scraping and all that sort of stuff is kind of like pre-rut laying down sign. How much of that as you're getting into this time of year, so like this next week, week and a half, 2 weeks, is scrape activity or just like being on the X? Because I feel like
I don't even look at scrapes typically because once it's like Halloween in Michigan here where we're at, it's like on and there can be scrapes around, but I'm not focused on them. I'm just focused on the downwind of the bedding areas, the doe bedding areas. So I haven't I hardly even see bucks hit scrapes, honestly.
so when you say like when you're saying that there's scrapes at the end of these fingers and rubs and stuff, like what does that like? Because earlier you had said, okay, that's what I'm like looking for. That those are the things when I get out of the boat that I want to see. Like, what are those? So then, what are you using those for? Like, what do they mean to you?
Well, they're typically coming out of bedding. So, I mean, it helps you locate bedding, I guess.
Okay, so again, I'm thinking about this from like like a guy who doesn't know how to East Scout, or
Right.
like they're saying, okay, I don't know, and we stack up like you said, like when this new spot, and we'll get into that here in just a second. Um, but you had said like that, like going in there, finding all that sign is like a big like win. So if you get a guy who's like going to go in and he says, well, I don't have a boat or anything like that, but I'm going to go to a new piece of property. I'm walking in, I'm walking this field edge. I get back in here and then I find some scrapes and then I find a rub line. That's like validation.
Right.
But what is it like? What does it mean? How are they using it? So if someone were to go in, park their boat, get up, and then there's the scrape, you know, maybe 2 weeks ago, okay, I need to hunt the scrape. But as we're getting into this time of year, like what does that mean? No idea.
I don't
No
know.
idea, he
We're not
says.
looking at scrapes now.
Well, yeah, but I'm just saying, like for
I mean, it tells you there's deer in the area, right? And it tells you there's bucks in the area, and um, I mean, there had to be around to me making the scrapes, and if you find rubs that are from this year, at some point this year, you can kind of pinpoint it down, like when them rubs were made. If it was a month ago, like the deer may have moved on, or he may not even be around that area anymore right now, but.
yeah. So like I say, I'm when you see listen to enough of this stuff to understand, like I'm trying to figure it out for everybody who's listening.
Right.
If they're just like, you know, they're going in, they're like, okay, I just went into a new spot and there's a bunch of scrapes, but like, shit, like, what do I do? You know, and there's
I mean, if you go into a spot and you're seeing a ton of scrapes and they're fresh scrapes, they're not full of leaves and they've been worked recently, I would say set up, 30 yards from them. You want to be on the downwind side of them, right? Um, and see, just observe. I mean, that's what you're doing anyway. Even, I mean, you need to see what's going on in that area. That'll help you figure it out more than anything. You know the sign is there. You know there's deer there. So if you set up, then you can see deer, see how they're using the area, see where they're coming out of bedding or going into bedding or whatever they're doing.
yeah. So, and I think this is really fun because you're like, yeah, I don't know.
Not very good at
No,
explaining stuff.
but what I'm getting at is it goes into like, so you find this new spot, you uh pin it on the map, you got to call the DNR and say, hey, can I go in there? You drive an hour, you pull your boat in, you go over there, and then the guys that are in the Marco Polo group, they were there for it in real time. But like you park the boat and then what?
So I parked the boat and I had no idea what I was getting into because like I said, never been there, never, I mean, just e-scouted. That was it. And thought, man, this looks like a good spot. I want to check it out. Get off the boat. There's kind of like a little thicket right on the lake edge there. I get through that and there's just rubs everywhere. I mean, I don't know that I've ever found an area in a hundred yard stretch. There was 20, 25 rubs, and some were from earlier this year, some were more recent, some were super fresh. Um, so yeah, I did a polo and I was like, holy cow, like I don't even know what to do, which I know what to do, but it just blew me away because it was just amazing to me to pick that spot, get in there, and then see the sign with never being there. So then I walked the edge and then I found a scrape that was super fresh. So that's where I set up that night.
And that's not for you, I feel like uncommon, right? I mean, like we hunted in Missouri, we go up, climb the top of this hill, go across the lake, climb this hill. There's a whole bunch of scrapes there. Eric says, I'm just going to set up right here because it makes sense. And then he can't figure out his equipment and has $2 walk right underneath him with his stand in his hand, his bow on the ground.
Uh,
I mean, dude,
yeah.
stop me if you heard this one before.
That one
but
still hurts.
but it's you're right more times than not. So with like I feel like you're someone who's like able to like read the wind and topography with water like more than anybody else because I feel like at least in your mind you're like where like a Dan Infalt or somebody like looks at a cattail swamp and says, "Well, I can already X all this off." And I feel like the way that you look at it, and I guess it's true, but it just isn't like intuitive to myself, or I don't think a lot of people think of it this way. But let's like, well, now we've already eliminated everywhere where the water is, and now we just have like this is,
Just think of the water as roads because that's basically what they are. So it's just different access points.
but that I mean, generally speaking, the deer aren't going to just cross the road, right? I mean, it's just like I mean, it's like a moat.
Yeah.
I
They
mean,
don't they don't typically, I mean, they will cross the water, but man, it's rarely just I have not yet to see one actually crossing the river.
but you have one spot where it's pretty shallow and there is a pretty good, I mean, it's a pretty good crossing
Yeah.
that you've got I think you had a camera there that was pretty cool, but
Yeah, they you might be thinking of Bergies.
no, I'm thinking
No?
of like right across from a boat launch, um, just down from it.
Yeah, I mean I guess you could get to that one if you had waders on and not a boat.
No, I'm not talking about for people. I'm talking about for deer.
Yeah.
So where like I think about like where we were at in Missouri, like those deer kind of in a way like the had painted themselves into a corner because
Yeah,
they
they
were so
they
far out on those
completely
points.
block themselves into a corner on a peninsula.
Yeah, and it's kind of like the oxbow stuff where, yes, they can cross the river, but like some of the rivers that you hunt in some of those areas, it's not just as easy as like where I was up by the Patreon hunt last like December or whatever was the oxbow, but the river there was so small, it's just a couple of jumps and
Right.
they maybe have to swim a little bit, but it's not big, it's not fast current, it's not anything like it is in some
Well,
of these other areas.
if you bust them out of there, I don't think they care if they got to jump in a big old river like they're going.
Yeah, no, I understand that, but I'm just saying like in my mind it's all the same. Like the oxbow is a peninsula is whatever, but like yeah, when we were in Missouri, if they busted off of that peninsula, they're like, I'm not gonna die.
Right.
So I'll swim across this freaking lake,
Right.
but it would have been less advantageous, than doing something different.
Right.
So I don't know, but I just think like for you, like it just lays. I don't know. I don't understand like the oxbows. I mean, I know enough to when people are talking about it to understand that okay, this is where the wind is. But like if you've ever hunted in any of those areas, like you need a pretty stiff wind to have a like bulletproof setup because every time you get into a situation like that I feel like you're trying to thread the needle because you get wind drifts and gusts and then it dies and then you got to deal with thermals. And so I think that that's one thing where when you go in there it it's just more intuitive to you, like it just makes sense where
Yeah, I try to, like, if I'm gonna get super close to a bedding area or something that I know where they're gonna be bedded, I try to only go in there on like a 7, 8+ mile an hour wind just so I don't have to worry about thermal pull and all that because I've definitely been busted from that multiple times.
well, and it's really frustrating because like
And the
every
river will pull it downstream and
but you're like validated and everything. You're like, okay, I got fresh tracks going in there. I got perfect wind. I got in clean. I got set up. You get up there, and then all of a sudden you feel the wind on the back of your neck, and then a deer starts blowing or something. And you're like, it's over. Like, and it was supposed the wind was supposed to be this
right.
way, or you know, it that's the part that is like super super frustrating and like
And at that point, would you get down or would you still hunt?
I don't know. I rarely get down.
Yeah, I do
Um,
too. I'm usually like, well, I'm already in here now, so
that's the that's the hardest part. And like, when you're especially I feel like and maybe this is like I don't I have a hard time saying that it's like wrong of me, right? But I hate walking around in the woods because like at that point, like you're gonna end up be like at prime time. So now if there's other hunters or if there's other things going on, you're the freaking asshole that's just wandering around out there.
yeah.
And it's like, yes, my time is valuable and I should, just get out of there or whatever. But I don't know. I have a very hard time like getting down. I mean, I hunted in there the one time last year with you, and like I walked in, and there was like a guy like literally where I was going,
Yep.
and I was like, God damn it, and backed out, and then I was trying to figure out like where to go because obviously I didn't expect him to be there,
Yeah, I didn't either. I didn't even know anybody was over there.
and I walked a long ass ways, and then I came back long ass ways. I got completely set up, and then I was like, I can't shoot anywhere in here. Like I got up and I cleared out as much as I could clear out, and I'm like, they're gonna come. They're gonna come right there. If they get past there, they're gonna bust me. So I have to shoot them right exactly right there, and I don't have like a good shot. And so I just got down and then I walked around, and it was like, but I hate doing that because not for the deer, but more for like the hunter etiquette thing, like that you don't go wandering in it, you know. So I hate gray light.
Wandering under somebody's tree stand.
Yeah, I don't know because it's happened to me enough times.
Yeah, I mean, it's happened to everybody and everybody's done it to other people, I feel. But
So you have an interesting situation because you're um uh PTO resets like right after like that good
November
window.
5th.
So like what's your strategy going forward here over the next week?
I'm actually gonna focus more on that new spot that I found up north. Um, I want I'm I wanted to stay. I didn't want to go in there and just tromp through that whole area, but I'm gonna dive deeper and I'm gonna try to access from a different side without the boat actually.
So here's the thing that I was gonna ask you about that spot, and I feel like because you've gotten really close, and you ended up you just glossed over this part, but you got that buck on camera, a really
Right.
really nice buck on camera, and in that situation though, have you got any other does on
I
camera? Do
got
you
one doe.
okay? So that was one of the things that you said. Okay, is at this time of year you just want to be downwind of doe bedding, but without tromping in there,
Yeah.
like now you have this like huge decision to make, which is
Well, I've hunted it three nights now, and I haven't seen a deer. So even though all that sign is there, I have to go. So I was looking at the map, and I think I found. So there's also a marsh there and a pond that I was expecting them to be bedded possibly by also. So I'm just gonna dig in deeper and see if they're in there. If I blow it out, I blow it out. At
so
this point, I feel like I have to.
so then that's what I'm saying. Like, so is the plan then to, if you think they're bedded on that marsh or in that marsh or whatever, just to get downwind of that,
Yes.
look for a runway coming out of there. And then are you looking for perpendicular runways to like a major runway, or are you like how does that like nuance part of it go?
I'm just gonna look for multiple runways where they come together. Um, and hopefully they're bedded in there. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what else to do at this point. So
Yeah. That's the hard part. That's why I was asking if you had any other deer on camera, because like you have like you have the deer that you want to kill.
yeah,
Uh,
so
but you've had three sits with no deer,
right.
and you've had no contact, so you don't know if he's just acts if that's just the way. No, okay. So have you hunted it morning and night?
I have not.
Okay,
So I've hunted
and
it.
you got pictures of him.
I hunted it Wednesday night, forgot the SD card for the camera. Hunted it Friday night, set the camera, and then I got a picture of a duck hunter walking by Saturday morning. And then Sunday morning, I got a picture of him. And then I hunted Sunday night because I thought by looking at the map, I thought I knew where he was bedding. And there is like a small bench right there with some oaks. The first night they were dropping heavy. Um, Friday night there was only a couple that dropped, but when I hunted there Sunday night, I was about 75 yards farther north, and there was quite a few oaks dropping there. So I was hoping he would come out of that bedding up to that bench to hit them oaks before dark. But yeah, and then Monday morning I got a doe on camera. So
So have you considered
a
hunting it
morning
in the
hunt.
morning?
Yeah, I have, but I can't until the weekend. So,
And then
and I have to see what the wind's doing.
you got to see where the duck hunters are.
That's the problem. That's what I'm worried about. I seem to run into way more duck hunters in the mornings. So,
So do you have an idea? Like, so you saw the duck hunter.
mhm.
Do you have an idea of where he would have parked his boat, like where he would have been?
I don't. I mean, you can access that from land, but the problem with it is you pretty much have to go right through the bedding area to get there.
And the duck hunter doesn't care because
Yeah,
he's
he
not
don't
deer
care.
deer hunting.
So,
But I'm just wondering if you get in there because with Michigan and spots, and all the stuff, like you could literally just get in there like super early, park your boat there with and leave a couple like lights on. No, I mean like honestly, and like kind of like claim your spot
yeah,
as if
I
you were
never thought
you were
about
a
that.
duck hunter. You're like, hey
Yeah.
man, I'm duck hunting this point. There's already somebody there, so as they're whether he's coming on a boat or something like that. Because I mean, That's what my brother does, like for duck hunting. It's like,
I
and
mean, that's a great option. I never even thought about that. I have yet to see another boat on the lake while I'm there also. So I don't know. Maybe this guy doesn't have a boat.
yeah, I mean, so from land or from a normal travel route to get to wherever this guy would have to get to, can you see across the lake? Could you see that spot on the lake? No.
No, I can't.
So, but that's, I mean, because if you just were there super early and your boat was there, like
Yeah.
Mr. Duck Hunter might be like, oh, somebody's already hunting there.
Yeah.
Throw some decoys out.
Go, go get in a tree.
I mean, but
That's a great idea. I like it.
so I mean, I don't know, but I know for a fact that like for the Michigan duck opener, guys will stay out all night and claim
Yeah.
their spot. I know that for the late split, like guys will camp out and do that sort of stuff. Same thing for like trout camp and things like
Yeah.
that. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know if the guy's not coming in by boat, then it's not really a deterrent. But
I would be
who know?
surprised if he wasn't though,
But the
because it's a half mile and I don't know.
yeah,
Most guys aren't going to do that and then walk through the marsh.
that's yeah. But so I mean, before I got too crazy, and I guess it would depend on like what your camera's telling you like throughout the week and what the wind's doing. But man, that seems like before I went and blew it up, because you're saying like that's your next option is to just go access it on foot, go in, try and figure it out. But you've got to because you don't know what's going on the other side.
Right.
So at least at this point, you could say, okay, well, I'm going to go in there and hunt it in the morning and
Even if I go hunt a morning, I'm gonna so basically I've pretty much set up right on the edge of the lake within 20 yards probably of the lake. I'm gonna dive in probably 75 to 100 yards from the lake because it where that bench is, it drops off on the other side to a marsh, and I think I want to be on that edge.
so in that scenario, like, are you going to be able to see out into the marsh to be able to
Yeah, I
like
think I
monitor?
think I will. I'll be able to see into the marsh and I'll be able to see that bench with the oaks on it. Because even if they're coming by and going in there, they could be doing a loop and coming out the other side of that marsh. And that's what I want to see. That's the only thing. That's what I'm thinking they're doing.
Well, um,
It's a
I'm
game of chess.
well, but the thing is that the reason I want to do this podcast and you can kind of like wrap it up with like your final thoughts, but is to for guys that are like looking for a new spot or that are going in for the first time, um, like this is the type of thing, and I feel like where you're so close, like right off of the rip, that like if this were a like I guess I guess you can answer it this way instead of me saying this is what I think. What do you think? Like if you had done this and this was a 5 day, 6 day out of state hunt, and you go in and like everything that's happened on day 1, 2, 3, 4, like how aggressive are you getting or what changes are would you make like in that situation if you could do it like in sequential days instead of
Right.
having to like go to work and pick a day or
So
whatever.
if it was say I had 3 to 5 days and I picked this out and went in there like I did the first night, I definitely would have set up in the same spot the first night and then probably the following morning. And then if I still didn't see anything or have any opportunities, then I would definitely dove in deeper to that marsh. But kind of the problem with that is by the time I get up there after work, it's an hour drive, boat ride, unloading the boat, all that. I don't really feel like I have time to be in there dinking around. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So actually Friday, depending on the wind, I have a few hours left to burn and I might go up there at like noon or something and dive in a little deeper.
So in that scenario, so I've said, all right, maybe you should give it a morning sit. And it's so strange because whether you have I mean, you just know that the deer's in the area and you got
Hmm.
one photo of him, but even if you don't have any more photos, you've already verified that he's there, right?
And I mean, I didn't even need the photo to verify that there is a buck there, obviously. I mean, I could tell by the rubs that at least some of the rubs that I looked at, there was a pretty decent buck in there because the tree he was rubbing on and branches, 8 inches away were getting tore up. Like it's a decent buck, right?
Yeah. So, um,
I'm
if
just thinking like if it was out of state and you were
yeah,
doing
yeah,
that,
yeah,
you're probably not going to drop a camera in there.
yeah. But if you're going in Friday and you've got these extra hours, like whether you know he's in there, whether you've got any more cameras or not, are you going to go in on the from the land side and pick your way
It
in?
depends
Because
on the wind.
yeah, but I mean, you're 0 for 3, I guess, on his entrance route
Right.
to his bed. You would think that, some of that rubbing and all that stuff. I mean, obviously, from what you're describing, he's spent a bunch of time there. You would think that some of it would have been like get up out of his bed, dink around
That's what
there.
I thought. Yeah. And you would think, I mean, he had the way the land lays out, he has to be bedded close to there. So I would think like he'd be getting up, coming up, munching on some acorns and rubbing it up a little bit and then going back to bed middle of the day or whatever. And then even in the evening and then going about his way.
So again, so this situation, are you going to go in if you've got the extra time? And so I guess you would have extra time if you were to say, okay, if you were going to commit to going in on land, because you'd say, okay, well, now I don't have to mess with the boat. I don't have to do anything. I do have a half a mile walk, but that's 10 minutes or
Right.
whatever, 20 minutes to get in there and then kind of have, a whole nother idea of like what's going on. And obviously, you're going to need a wind where you can be on the downwind side of that bedding. There's no
Right.
point in doing it any other way. But like you're 0 for 3 for evenings. I mean, it just, and I always tell myself this when like things are sucking. Like, I'm like, it just takes 1 minute, like 30
It
seconds.
takes
This could
like
be,
20
yeah,
seconds
this will be the
to
best hunt
change
ever.
everything.
So, but like, what, uh, what is it that like is going to play into that thought process? Let's say that you have a good wind to go in either way. Let's say you have just like a wind like directly out of the east or something where it's, you know.
I will probably take the boat
Okay.
and then go in farther to that marsh. But if the wind isn't right for that, then I will go in by land. And there's some points that I'm super interested in the south on the south side of that, but we need a north wind for that, and I'm not sure what the wind will be Friday.
Okay. Okay.
Either way, I'm diving in farther, whether it's coming in from the south or diving off of uh that oak bench down into that marsh.
Okay.
So the 3 nights I did hunt, take it for what it's worth, I guess, but 125, 150 yards out on the other side of that oak bench where it drops down into that marsh, the Blue Jays were going crazy at like 6 o'clock all 3 nights. So that could be a good sign too.
And that's the same. You can get there with the same access.
Right.
Okay. You
And
don't
that's
have to.
very unintrusive access coming in from the lake.
Okay. All right. Well, I mean, obviously, I'm rooting for you. I want to see how this plays out, and thanks for coming on here and like kind of opening up a little bit of insight because, like I say, I really truly feel like for you to go in and just be this close, like this often, can
Yeah,
really
but
help some people out.
it's years of doing it to know what to look for. And once you find a you e-scout and you find something and go in and you see how the deer are using that area, you can take that spot that you're in that you e-scouted and put the same use the same terrain features and into a different area, and a lot of times it'll play out similar.
Yeah. And I mean, you can, I guess that is true for everything deer hunting, I think, except for this time of year. Like,
Yeah,
and that's that's the hardest part. The only thing that's consistent, I feel like, is like this is going to be what bedding looks like, and this is where I can be on the
right,
downwind side of it.
right.
So, but man, I really appreciate you coming over and hanging out,
Yeah, thanks
talking
for having
hunting,
me.
and
I wish I was better at explaining stuff.
well, but it's what's funny about that, and I was thinking about it when we were talking, and you kind of, you get kind of like where you fumble, and you're like, ah, uh, but I was talking when I was in the UP with one of the Patreons. He lives up there, and he was saying like when guys can't really explain it, it's like but they're doing it. Like it just is like a woodsmanship thing instead of like look at me, I'm gonna explain how to do this thing.
Yeah.
It's just like I just know how to do it because I do it.
Yeah,
Like
but I can't say that. I just
yeah.
know. Just been looking at e-scouting long enough. I just know what to look for.
Yeah. But it's like but like when you go in and you have that like you just have the feeling or like you're like,
Right.
okay, this has to be it. And I feel like again, like that's where I feel like I can do that on deer, but I can't do that on like mature animals. Like I can go in and be like, this is where the deer are and this is why. But I can't do that when it's a mature deer, mature, especially mature buck. Like this is how they act. Like, no, I don't know. I have no idea. The only way that I know how they act is get downwind to bedding and then just like eventually it'll
Yeah,
happen. Do that enough and it'll
it'll play
it'll
out.
add up. So, but yeah, anyways, I appreciate it. And yeah,
Yeah, thanks a
thanks.
lot.